Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to paint this daffodil on round watercolor paper. I want to experiment with some granulating colors in the background, and I also wanted to contrast that with some just regular watercolors in the center. So I'll be using Masha's watercolors for my granulating colors with a little bit of Turner Mars Black. And for my traditional colors, I'll be using some Rembrandt watercolors. And it was so funny. After getting the Masha's watercolor palette, I received this other bamboo palette from Artix, which is weird because I've never seen palettes like those before. And then to come across two in the course of a couple weeks, it was just so weird. Anyway, I'm sketching on with an erasable colored pencil on my round watercolor block, and the watercolor block is from Arteza. I'm not sure how long those have been around, but it is 100% cotton paper, and I'll be reviewing it after I've gotten a few projects under my belt. And I'm using some of this beautiful kind of tealy green color from the Masha's watercolor set. Now the Masha's watercolors, I believe all the ones in this set are multiple pigment mixes, so you can get some really interesting effects as the colors kind of split apart from each other. So I'm showing this in time lapse because I think it might be kind of interesting to see that happen rather than in real time, where it might not be as, you might not really see the effect happening. Now, I will be working in layers on this because I ended up a little too light in the background, and after I looked back at that, I was like, I need some more contrast. So I'm using a paper towel here to lift up any color that went on the flower. I like to do my backgrounds wet into wet because often if I paint around my focal point and then go in and paint the focal point, it just looks too like cut and pasted on. I don't feel like the subject is integrated into the background, and that just bugs me. I don't like it on my own work. You can do whatever you like. There's no right way or wrong way. That's just what I prefer. And I'm using a bit of cut up credit card here to scrape in the kind of onion skin texture of that little sheath that surround the stem, where the stem and the kind of hip of the flower meet. And then every time I put a little more color on top of that, it'll soak into those scratches and really make it look a little bit more realistic, which I love. I love that technique. Now I'm still working on damp paper, which means that my colors are going to fuzz out a little bit. And, if you want to avoid that, just let it dry completely. But I was really curious about what these colors were going to do on this paper as they interacted with one another. I was kind of taking a break from another project when I was fooling around with this, and I happened to turn on the camera. I didn't know if this would actually end up being a video that I was going to share online, but I really liked the way it came out, and I figured out why not share a time lapse of it. So now I'm going in on dry paper with a small round watercolor brush. This is a number 2 Mimic round, and I am using the traditional watercolors. The sap green in the center, that's not Rembrandt. I can't remember what brand that is, and that deeper yellow is actually a Shinhan cadmium yellow orange, I believe. I did have a few oddballs I just stuck in there in that palette with it. Just, I like to mix my palettes up and move things around. It's kind of crazy, but it's just kind of fun. I like to mix the purpley color that I used in the background with the yellow to get a nice brown. That's really good for the kind of husky, sheathy area. Also the shadows, it works really well. Purple's a great color to shadow yellow because it's an opposite color. It's opposite on the color wheel. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to put purple in the background, is because it will make my yellow flower really pop and stand out. Actually, this is kind of a pretty effect I have going right here with those soft backgrounds and the soft foreground, but it just didn't have the contrast that I wanted. Instead, everything's kind of like middle value, and it's not as interesting, and it's not really what I had in my mind's eye when I was thinking about this painting here. It's fun to work on a different shape of paper than you're used to. So if you always work like, say, 9 by 12, maybe working 8 by 8 or working round, or just kind of mixing up the format you usually use once in a while, can help you break out of creative block. And round is just great because it's just kind of an uncommon shape that you don't often see with your watercolor. After letting that layer dry, I realized that I did want that background to be darker, so I'm going in with some clear water and just wetting in sections the background, and I'm going in and adding that purpley Masha's watercolor with some Turner Mars Black, because I love the texture of the Mars Black from Turner, and it's also cool in undertone, which is really nice. I have other Mars Black that has a little bit warmer undertone, and I just knew a cooler black would just look better with that purple, which is a kind of a cooler bluish purple. And I'm just dabbing in in color. I'm seeing what I can get. I don't want to cover up any of the good effect in the background, but I do need to add some more darker value there to make the flower stand out. So I guess basically what I'm doing here is trying to keep what I like in the background for the most part, but also augment it where I need it a little bit darker. The thing with the granulating watercolors, in my opinion, is that they kind of look best when they're just kind of allowed to do their thing and you don't have a lot of stuff. You're not really doing too many techniques to it. Just kind of letting it do its thing seems to look the best. But you also need to have, there's a lot of different balances I think you have to get. You have to get the right amount of water so that it will give you that granulating texture. You have to have the enough contrast between your subject and the background, and you need to let a little bit of the white space show through so you can see the texture. And I'm still like, even though I've been using like specialized granulating watercolors for a while, I'm still definitely in the experimenting phase and trying to figure out exactly what I want to use them for in my artwork, because they are so cool, but it's really easy to go overboard with them and then have it kind of take away from the whole effect, or to not use them strongly enough and have them not even, really show up. So I ended up just going into the whole other layer of this paint. I still was able to get a nice granulating effect, but I really think the best practice is try to do it all in one go, all in one wet and wet background. But it's good to know you can go in with another layer if you don't get it quite as dark as you want it. I want to build up some of the pretty texture in the little ruffly edges on the daffodil. I love daffodils. They're such a nice sign of spring. And just building up layers of transparent watercolor. Even though that's a cadmium-based yellow there, when you add the water to it, it does thin it down enough to be a transparent layer. I am kind of using in the shadow areas anyway. The lemon yellow is nice and translucent and vibrant, and that is giving me some nice cooler, brighter highlights. And I'm putting in some of the purpley mix to give my shadows a little extra kind of depth and give me a little more contrast where I need that. I'm just being aware that I am using purple over yellow in a glazing fashion, and that can make mud really easily. So by using a purple, it has a little bit more of a blue undertone. It will keep me better. It'll make it so I'm not as likely to get mud. Cooler colors generally make mud less than warmer colors, and transparent colors will make less mud than opaque colors. So keep that in mind. If you are a beginner to color mixing, just try to keep your colors, try to keep to transparent colors as much as you can, and cool colors. When in doubt, choose a cooler version. So if like you have cadmium orange versus alizarin crimson, crimson's going to give you a cleaner mix because it's more transparent and it's cooler in undertone. Generally, transparent colors tend to be cooler in undertone. I'm not sure why that is, but that's something I've noticed. I do like to go in with some colored pencil, and I really wasn't happy with the amount of contrast that I had gotten with my flower, so I'm going in with a white Derwent Chromaflow pencil and adding some highlights. I'm also going in with some of the brighter kind of lemony yellow Chromaflow, and just kind of augmenting where I need to. It's a great technique. These pencils are nice and opaque. Other choices would be like the Derwent Color Soft or Prismacolor, Premier. Those are all really opaque colors that work well. Also, the Derwent Lightfast is another good option. I was just playing around, so I wasn't too worried about light fastness in this because, I'm just fooling around. And plus, it's such a small amount of colored pencils. I really don't worry about that too much because it's not like I'm doing the entire thing, and there is color underneath it. And yeah, adding a few more white highlights. You can also use a white paint pen or a white gel pen to perk up those highlights if you want to. Purple is great to give accent lines and even shading on the flower. Even though it's purple pencil, you might think that's way too bright. It really isn't. It will give you a little bit of a life and pop of color because it is an opposite color. It's a complementary color. Across the color wheel, as I say. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this time lapse. Maybe it gave you some ideas. I hope so. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.